Jake here with Fresh Freight. Have you ever had difficulty getting your equipment in for maintenance due to long lead times at service locations? I know I certainly have. And sometimes you just simply cannot afford to wait. Today, we are piloting our very first episode at Fresh Freight. In this series, we're going to walk you through step by step to performing common necessary maintenance items on commercial trucks and trailers. Our goal is to help you simply save some time and save some money. As you know, maintenance is very expensive and can be very time consuming. At freshfreight.com, you'll find PDFs to accompany each of our maintenance walkthroughs, along with the required tools and items necessary to complete each maintenance item. Let's talk tools. For a one-time investment of $300, our team is able to save well over 10 grand a year in labor. Our mobile service unit is able to service tractors, trailers, reefers, APUs, install ELDs, repair airlines, replace air valves, replace mud flaps, replace bulbs, and much more with this small collection of tools. We are able to do nearly anything that doesn't require heavy-duty tools or a lift. All it takes is two hands, a toolkit, and a step-by-step process which we're going to provide for you on our website. You'll find a PDF of our complete tool collection along with the prices we paid for each tool. Now, to the meat and potatoes. Today we are servicing a tractor APU. An APU is known as an auxiliary power unit. An APU essentially acts as a generator for HVAC and powers appliances in the tractor without the tractor engine being on. They're designed to save fuel and reduce emissions compared to idling a truck engine through the night as the driver sleeps. Here are the tools and items required for the service. The items needed: you're going to need 1 gallon of oil, fuel to prime the fuel filter, an oil filter, an air filter, and an inline fuel filter, as well as an oil collection pan, a 5-gallon bucket for cleanup, rags, and gloves, and of course safety gear. The tools you're going to need include a filter wrench, a ratchet with socket, 7/8 is the socket size on the ratchet, and an extension with a socket on it that will fit your hose clamps. And if you prefer to not climb around on the ground, it's probably a good idea to invest in a creeper. With everything in place, we're ready to hit the steps. We're here with our auxiliary power unit, which we're going to service today. Again, we provided you the tools. All you need is the tools, the items, and the 10 PDF steps that you're going to find on our website. First things first, safety. Step number one, no matter what we do, Fresh Freight, this is going to be safety related. In regards to this service, the first thing you want to do is make sure your APU is turned off. We've confirmed that in the cab. I've also had another gentleman confirm that in the cab the APU is turned off. We've also disconnected power to the APU unit to ensure that while we're in here playing around, it does not kick on. The last thing we want to do is lose a finger in the fan or on a belt because we're in there wrenching and the auxiliary power unit kicks on. That's very dangerous. Again, another extension of safety, you want to make sure you have your proper PPE whenever you're doing any maintenance. I always suggest at a minimum that you have safety goggles, gloves, a vest, and steel-toed boots. And with that, we're ready to pull the panels apart and get started. Here we are with our AP unit, which we're going to service with our 10 steps. So we've got the APU disengaged, we've ensured it's turned off in the cab, and we've also disconnected our power to the APU to ensure that it's not going to turn on while we've got our hands in there pulling it apart. And again, on top of that, we don't want it to dry start with no oil in it. That could be very dangerous for the engine, and we don't want to do any damage internally. What we're going to do first, we're going to pull apart the cover and look inside and see how the components are wearing. And when you're inside, some of the basic items you're going to want to look for outside of being able to access the filters is the belts and the hoses and just a general health of your different items. Step number two, we want to clean our components to make sure all our components that we need to change out are accessible. So first things first, our inline fuel filter. It's right here, it's usually up top, you can spot it pretty easily. It's this little guy with the screen in line, which is connected by 2 hose clamps between the fuel line. So having found the inline fuel filter, we're going to want to find the primary fuel filter, which is typically the first filter here. You're going to look down, you're going to spot it. If you have any questions, most of the time the filter will have the name of the filter on it. You can't see it, it's upside down here because the filter's already primed. I've already filled it with fuel and we don't want to spill it. So we have access to both our fuel filters. Our air filter is contained here in this canister. It's very easy to access. That's usually the first one I'll pop in and out. You've got 2 clips. You pull it off, set that aside, and you can pull the air filter out and get eyes on it. While this one doesn't look terrible, we're still going to service it just because this whole system needs service and we've got a filter here and it makes sense. The last filter you want to be able to find is the oil filter. The oil filter, again, it should say oil filter on it if you can read it through the grime, is going to be located on the front of the engine block. Right here, you probably can't see it on video, but I've got it spotted. I'm able to access my fuel filter, my oil filter, my inline fuel filter, and my air filter pretty well. So all the items I need to access for the service, I can see, they're clean, and they're easy to access. Step number 3, we're going to want to remove all the filters before we drain the oil pan. Again, that's just to protect us from making a mess. The first filter I always remove, as mentioned, is the air filter. The new air filters will usually come with an oil you can put around the gasket top to slide back in there to ensure you don't have too much difficulty getting it to connect very well with the inlet. With that in place, the second filter, again, working from easiest to hardest, the easiest filter next on this unit to take off is a fuel filter. It's always very handy to have a pair of fuel wrenches available. These are small, they're very cheap, and they're simple to use. They're adjustable. Get a good grip and just give it a solid turn to the left to loosen it. And voila, our fuel filter is dropped. The next filter we're going to want to take off is our oil filter. Again, once you've got your line of access in there, you should be able to fit your reasonably sized oil wrenches in there and give it a good tug to the left. Once you've got that seal broken, you should be able to reach your hand in there and loosen it by hand. Just be cognizant of where you're removing the filters from, because sometimes it can be easy to mix up the fuel filter and the oil filter, and you don't want to try to screw on the wrong filter and end up stripping your threads. The last filter we need to remove is our inline fuel filter. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and throw up our other filters, starting with the oil filter. I've already got oil in here, it's primed. I've put a little oil on the gasket to make sure it's got a nice tight fit. Always check the flange there after removing the other filter to make sure that the filter gasket on the other one came loose, because if you double gasket, you're going to have a terrible oil leak. When it comes to putting filters on, any mechanic will tell you, please, please, please do not over tighten them, and only tighten them by hand. When you over tighten a filter or use a wrench to tighten them, you're going to cause some serious headache for the next guy that goes there to try to remove them, because it's going to be very, very tough for them to break that seal. All right, now we've got the oil filter in place. We're going to go ahead and throw up the fuel filter. Similar situation with the fuel filter, you don't want to double gasket it. Okay, now we've got our oil filter and our primary fuel filter attached. The next filter we need to change is our inline fuel filter. As previously mentioned, it's held together by 2 hose clamps, inline and a fuel line, which can be kind of difficult to reach. Okay, now we've got the filter out. We're going to toss that with the rest of our junk filters and go ahead and install this one the same way the original pulled out of there. And we're going to adjust our hose clamps to make them easier to tighten so they're not at an angle, and we'll be able to finagle it to our benefit. Alright, so once you've got your inline fuel filter in place, give it a little tug, make sure you're comfortable with how it feels and that it's tight and not going to go anywhere. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and take our 7/8 ratchet or wrench and get under here, find the bottom of our oil pan, and bust that bolt free and drain our oil. Give it a couple slaps until that bolt comes free, and then once you've got some free play, you'll be able to remove it by hand. Make sure your oil pan's directly underneath the spout here. That way, once the oil starts flowing, it's going to go straight into the pan. Please be cognizant that if you've ran this recently, this oil will be hot. We don't want to spend much money. We don't want to make a mess. We're going to let this drain oil flow a little bit. We're going to check over our vitals again. Make sure we don't see anything out of the ordinary. Go ahead and pull out that dipstick. Let it hang out until you're ready to put some more oil in and test the level. Go ahead and remove your filler cap. Again, the filler cap is the cap that says 710 on it, but if you flip it around, it's actually oil. Make sure you pull the oil filler cap off, not the 710 cap. You're going to want to make sure you have a very sturdy filter. I got this thing for a couple bucks off Amazon. All right, crew. Once your oil pan is drained efficiently, you're gonna go ahead and put that oil pan plug back in. Be wary that you don't put it in sideways or cocked. It should go in smoothly without any resistance. All right, now that we've got all our filters attached, the oil plug's back in, we're gonna go ahead and dump 1 gallon of oil in there. And with these being a diesel engine, you're gonna wanna use diesel engine oil. 15W40 is typical for most APU units. Once you've got your oil in there, go ahead and remove your filter, put back in your oil cap. The next step, we're gonna go in the cab, we're gonna turn the APU on, and we're gonna let this run for a little bit to get the oil flowing through the system. And then we're gonna come out, check our oil level, and see what we need to do from there. Well, there you have it, folks, and we just knocked out an APU service with minimal tools. All you need are these few tools, the service items, and our PDF list, which you can find on our website, to knock this thing out. Be safe. Step 1, safety first. Ensure the APU is off and the power source is disengaged. Step 2, clean off the components. Make sure everything is accessible and you can see each item that you need to get your hands on. Step 3, remove the filters first. Step 4, replace all of the filters. Always prime your filters first. Prime your oil filter and prime your fuel filter before restarting to ensure a proper startup. 5, drain the oil pan. 6, replace the bolt and fill the unit with oil. 7, start up the APU. 8, check the oil level and adjust as needed. 9, clean up the area. Reapply the covering and ensure you've got all your tools from inside the unit and there's nothing left over that should not be left over. And 10, make sure you discard the oil properly.